The Conservative Party will be returning to the House of Commons with the same number of seats as when they left it, and two fewer than what they won in 2019. But those MPs who were elected will meet on Tuesday for the first time since September's vote. Ontario MP Michael Chong is here to discuss what he thinks is next for the party, the leader, and the agenda. Good to see you, Michael Chong. Appreciate you doing this.
Great to be here.
So a caucus meeting this week. I'm sure you've all been talking amongst yourselves, but this is the first sort of organized one. What do you want to hear? What do you think Conservative MPs want to hear from the leader as you gather for the first time?
Well, we're going to be doing two things. First, we're going to be abiding by the Parliament of Canada Act and taking the 4 recorded votes regarding the 4 rules concerning caucus. And then we're going to have a discussion about what's happened in the last election. And so I'm hoping that we have a full airing of what went right and what went wrong, hearing out our colleagues.
And the 4 rules, you're humbly not taking credit for them, but we're talking about the Reform Act measures that you put in place. So that yes, you'll vote on them, and generally the Conservative Party is supportive of all of them, even if other parties are not. And it gives people the right to assess whether they want a review of leadership. Is that correct?
No. What the 4 rules? Well, let me tell you what the 4 rules are, and then talk about the rule of reviewing concerning the leader. So the first rule is the election. The rules concerning the election of a caucus chair. The second is the rule concerning the expulsion or readmission of a caucus member who's been expelled. The third rule is the election of an interim leader in the event that the leader is removed or dies or suddenly resigns. And the fourth is caucus initiating a review and removal of the party leader. So it's that fourth and last rule that we will be voting on. I'm supportive of enacting that rule. If we enact the rule, it doesn't mean that there's a review of the party leader. It means that caucus at some point in the future has the ability to do that.
And if all 4 get supported, and generally the Conservatives do support them all, they like your Reform Act, could Aaron O'Toole then say, I would like us to now vote on how I've performed as leader? Would that be something that would sort of follow, or not necessarily?
Well, he himself can't trigger a review of his leadership. That requires 20% of Conservative MPs in writing. To send in a letter to the caucus chair requesting a review vote. So it doesn't happen at the leader's request. It happens at the initiative of at least 20% of Conservative MPs.
What would you hope, after all those parts are sort of taken care of, what would you hope the conversation turns to immediately? The fact that the party won 2 less seats, the fact that you grew in some places, lost in other, namely in Alberta. What is sort of top of mind for you?
Well, I think we need to have a frank discussion about what went right and what went wrong. Clearly, we didn't win the last election, but I do think, just on a preliminary glance at the data, I haven't done a deep dive, as they say, but I've taken a very summary look at the data, and it looks like we're on the right track. In Ontario, our percent of the vote increased by 3% from 32 to 35% in the last election. And if you look in Quebec, our vote jumped by 4 percentage points from 16 to 20% compared to the 2019 election. And for the first time in a decade, we won a seat in the province of Newfoundland. We increased our seat counts in the Maritimes. And so I think we're headed in the right direction. But I think Aaron O'Toole needs some more time to put the party on the right track so that we can win in the next election. As I've been thinking about this over the last several weeks, I've said to people, Aaron O'Toole's only been leader for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And people say to me, no, he's not. He's been leader for 12 months. Well, my response is, going into this election, he was leader for 12 months pandemic time. That's essentially 6 months in real time. Both Stephen Harper and Andrew Scheer had over 2 years to prepare for their first election, and Harper had 4 years to prepare for his second election. So I think the leader needs a bit more time to get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, those all sound reasonable and logical arguments, but as you know, that's not always the case in politics. So what does Mr. O'Toole have to say, do you think, to people in your caucus to convince them that you're right, that he needs another chance, and that Canadians are only starting to get to know him?
Well, one of the first things he did after the election that I thought was a real mark of leadership was he said publicly that he would be voting for all 4 of these Reform Act rules, including enacting the rule to allow Conservative MPs to review his leadership at any moment in time. And I thought that was a real show of leadership, a real show of strength, because it essentially said, look, I have confidence in Conservative MPs, and I want Conservative MPs to have confidence in me. And I think that was a real mark of leadership. He's also initiated a review of what went right and what went wrong during the election campaign. He announced that the day after the election, and I look forward to the results of that review.
What do you understand who's doing that review, what that will entail, whether it includes his leadership?
I don't know the details of the review. All I know is that he's announced it. I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more detail about it at our caucus meeting on Tuesday.
One of the things that didn't happen, and my colleague Aaron Ware's got a good piece out today, is breakthroughs in urban areas where the vast majority of ridings are concentrated. So the GTA, Montreal, Vancouver, all the obvious places. And I wonder how does the Conservative Party start to speak to some of those voters? Because I think Mr. O'Toole was trying to bring them there, by trying to move some of the positions. But how does the Conservative Party tap into those riding-rich centres?
That's a good question. If you look at the overall results in Ontario, for example, in 2019, we got 32% of the vote. In the last election, just weeks ago, we got 35% of the vote. So clearly, overall, we increased our vote percentages. In some ridings, we went up. In some ridings, we went down. What I've seen in the data that I've seen is that in 20 ridings in Ontario, a shift of as little as 1% of the popular vote would have moved those ridings over into the Conservative column. And so in so many ridings, I think we came close to winning them, but we didn't get far enough to actually doing that. So I think the trend lines are clear. We're increasing our results in urban Ontario. We just need a bit more time to get the job done and figure out what we need to do that in the next election.
I'll just ask you one quick question about the parliamentary agenda. We certainly heard from the Prime Minister last week about the things he wants to see done quickly, whether it be, mandating vaccines on airplanes and rail and other things. Obviously, Conservatives didn't want the election. We had it. It's all done and dusted. What do you want to see as sort of a priority in this Parliament in terms of the conversation for Canadians?
Well, what I would like to see is a much more conciliatory Prime Minister who understands that the election was a real repudiation of him. He set out at the beginning of the campaign to win a majority government. That's the only reason why he pulled the pin and put us into that early election. And Canadians clearly said to him, no, you can't have your majority. And in fact, we're going to return a parliament that is remarkably similar to the 2019 parliament. And so I think he needs to heed the advice of Canadians and work with opposition parties to come forward with an agenda that has the support of various members of the opposition. To not do that and assume that he's got a mandate to do whatever he wants to do, I think would be a wrong read of the mood of the Canadian public.
Okay, Conservative MP Michael Chong, always good to speak with you. Appreciate you getting up and starting your day with me. Thank you very much.
Great to be here.
Okay, take care.